explicar los beneficios que tiene la habilidad de ser bilingüe y por qué escuelas primarias sería bueno que tengan un programa de educación bilingüe. You guys understood what I just said? Thank your parents. If you at least understood half of it, I guess you can thank your high school Spanish teacher. There are so many benefits to being bilingual in this country. And there's just so many more opportunities that are available for you. There are some programs called dual immersion education in elementary schools. And I'm gonna explain why all schools should have these programs and the many benefits that come along with them. In this globalized world, there's such a constant need for bilingual people, whether it be Spanish, Korean, Japanese, any other language. There's just such a high demand of it. In the workforce, it's necessary. I feel like employers are always looking for that bilingual employee. It's just like that perfect catch. Ellen Bialystock, a cognitive neurologist who spent 40 years researching why there's such a high advantage in being bilingual, says that bilingual children have a better, more effective way of processing language and multitasking as well. So all those things are very helpful in a working environment. So to expand on that multitasking concept, being bilingual is just a workout for your mind overall. James Flynn, a renowned scientist, explains that the mind is much more like a muscle than we've ever realized. It needs to get cognitive exercise. There's a system in the brain called the executive control system, and it's pretty much like a general manager. It's what helps you keep you focused on what's relevant at the time. So if there's two things that are going on in your mind at one time, it filters and sees this is what matters right now, and that you can switch between the two. And using two languages regularly, they both pop up into your head when you're speaking one or the other. Like you're constantly translating whether you know it or not. Like right now, what I'm saying right now, I can translate it in Spanish in my head without even thinking of it. And so we're using this executive control system that we have in our brain more often, which makes it, it works it out just like your muscles. The more you work them out, the bigger and stronger they get. Just like your brain, the more you work out your brain, the better it gets. So now that you know the advantages of being bilingual, I'll elaborate on these dual immersion programs that are available at many elementary schools. The Center for Applied Linguistics explains that they are special programs in elementary schools that give emphasis to English and a non-English language. And usually it's when 1 to 2/3 of the students in that school are speakers of that non-English language, and the remainder are just native English speakers. And there's different methods. There's a 90-10 method in which they start in kindergarten and they teach 90% in Spanish and only 10% in English. And as they increase the grades, that ratio increases. Then it's 80% Spanish and 20% English in first grade, and so on and so forth, until they reach that 50-50 point. And it's easy to say, oh, what if they forget one language over the other, or what if is one taking over the other language? And that's not true, because children have this critical period in which it's so much easier for them to learn a second language at a young age. And if a child is being spoken in Spanish all the time at school, but the main language at home is English, they're not gonna replace that English with Spanish, because they can speak both of them equally, whether they reach that equilibrium at school with their friends or just at home with their families. And the 50-50 method, they just start at 50-50 from the beginning. They start teaching 50% English and 50% Spanish since kindergarten. And they're both very effective. I guess a lot of people can worry that, what if they end up speaking like Spanglish, or they have both of those languages constantly in their head, so they get mixed up between the two. But this isn't true because they learn both languages properly. For example, like in school, they're going to be learning language arts in Spanish and language arts in English. Math in Spanish, even though it's numbers, still like the names of different theories and properties, they're going to be learning it in Spanish and in English. So they learn both properly. The reason for people who are bilingual and they kind of have this Spanglish lingo is because they know one more than the other and they kind of need to replace some words sometimes. But if you're being taught both of them equally in a proper manner, that's not going to be an issue. So I can speak from personal experience because I went into kindergarten not knowing any English whatsoever. Spanish was my first language. I was scared because I didn't know. I couldn't even understand my teacher on the first day of school. I didn't know what was going on. But, I mean, could you tell that from hearing me speak right now? Could you tell that I had no clue how to even put a paragraph together in English before? And it's because, a lot of parents who speak Spanish, they don't want to teach their children their language because they feel that it'll interfere with their English learning later on, and it really doesn't, because schools, the children have just this, their brain is just like a sponge. It wants to soak up everything, and they learn. I learned the language, and I've seen it to my advantage, and not just in the workforce, but also in school. I do agree that it's bilingual people are better at multitasking, and just the way we process language is a little bit differently, and I feel like that's very that's to our advantage a lot. So I see these advantages in being bilingual are one of the best. It's the best support for these dual immersion programs in elementary school. So I believe that every school should have these programs, and it shouldn't be forced upon, but it's something if parents want their children, and then they should voluntarily be able to apply for it because of the gift that it'll give their children that will last a lifetime and be to their advantage, especially in this increasingly globalized world that we're living in, when there's so much competition wherever it is, in schools and in the workforce. There's always going to be competition, and if you have just that one extra talent, that one extra skill that the other person next to you, that a employer is looking at, you're more likely to get that job.
So Vicky, share your thoughts, please.
Cindy, I think that you understood the information very well, and you seemed very confident. You had good eye contact. You seemed personally invested in what you were talking about as well, and that made me interested. And I liked your overall presence, your gesturing, the way you moved around. You didn't stay in one side of the room too long. But where I think you could improve is maybe a little bit more authoritative proof for the argument, just to back it up a little bit more. There were a couple times where you had awkward pauses, and I think maybe once or twice, not really very noticeable, but you did kind of glance at the cards, not for your quotes, so you might want to keep an eye out for that. Overall, I
All right. Well, let me just start with all the delivery things. I thought you were excellent on everything. I thought there was good enthusiasm in your voice, especially at the beginning. There was maybe a little section in the transition between your attention device and when you got to the body of the speech where you kind of slowed down, you were a little bit hesitant, the pacing was a little bit awkward. But once you got into the body of the speech, you perked back up and were a lot more in control there. So, you know, except for that one little awkward transition section, I thought you sounded great. And your facial expressions are very animated while you're talking to us. All of the delivery things I think were really solid. I do think that you need to have a little stronger preview because I kind of got the general idea about we're going to talk about the advantages and then this immersion program, but I think it needs to be developed a little bit more. It sounds like it's not quite a problem solution statement, but you know, here's an advantage and a solution. How do we get to that advantage statement? The advantages, that's where most of your content, your evidentiary content is. You've got some information about how important or how useful it is to have a second language, both from a productivity point of view, but also from your brain functioning, and I like that. That's where most of the citation is in the body of the speech. And then once you get to the immersion program, this is where I think you rely a lot on personal experience, which is good. I think that's a good way to talk about it, but we need to get a little bit more data on the efficiency of these kinds of programs. The thing that I was wondering about is, do schools offer these programs? Is this an option that people can get if they chose? You know, I'm sitting here, you know, my kids are out of school now for the most part. You know, they'll probably still go back once in a while, but you know, they both have college degrees. I'm thinking, if I was a parent and my kid was starting school, what would I have to be asking for? Who would I have to talk to? What schools offer these kinds of things? What barriers preventing me from getting this? That's the kind of information I thought was a little bit underdeveloped. So I've got this idea about the immersion program that you're talking about, and it sounds, you know, like it would be a great way to be picking up a second language instead of taking classes when you get to high school, you know, learning the language as you go along and picking it up that way. I think that's a really good idea, and I would like to be able to know more about those kinds of programs. I just felt like it was a little sketchy on that, and that your personal example, although it does help give a lot of credibility to the presentation, it's not quite enough to sell the program that you're selling, and so that needs to be developed a little bit more. All right, thank you.